Good evening and welcome to the Newshour Agenda. I'm Madhavdas G. Viewers, India-Canada ties have hit a new low, with India launching a diplomatic counter-strike against Canada's Trudeau government over its wild and dangerous allegations. India has decided to recall its High Commissioner in Canada and other diplomats whom Canada sought to link with Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar's killing. India has also expelled 6 Canadian diplomats, asking them to leave the nation by the 19th of October 2024. After India's strong response, Trudeau is back to his old playbook. Just like last year, when Trudeau first linked India with the Nijjar killing, Trudeau addressed the media and reiterated his allegations, but failing to give an iota of hard evidence once again.
And the protection of our citizens is paramount. That's why, when our law enforcement and intelligence officials began pursuing credible allegations that agents of the Government of India were directly involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, on Canadian soil, we responded. CMP Commissioner stated earlier, they have clear and compelling evidence that agents of the Government of India have engaged in and continue to engage in activities that pose a significant threat to public safety. This includes clandestine information gathering techniques, coercive behavior targeting South Asian Canadians, and involvement in over a dozen threatening and violent acts, including murder. This is unacceptable.
And while lack of evidence against Nijjar is one aspect, his continued insistence on ignoring the fact that Nijjar was a terrorist is another. India has named Nijjar in a charge sheet detailing his activities. Let's take a look at Nijjar's terror files, which Trudeau is conveniently choosing to ignore. Now, this is the person that Trudeau is talking about. He's been designated a terrorist by India in 2020. Also, Punjab government has sought extradition in 2022 for terror charges. He was also wanted in the 2007 Ludhiana blast case that killed 6. There's also the fact that he was booked in 2010 for an alleged role in a blast near Patiala Temple. There's also an LOC or a lookout circular and a red corner notice issued in 2015 and 2016. Here's also what Trudeau knows about Nijjar but won't say: the fact that Nijjar was declared a terrorist by the Government of India. In fact, the charge sheet very specifically mentions Nijjar as the main conspirator. The fact that he has conspired to commit terror acts in Punjab, the fact that he has conspired with Ashdeep and others, that co-conspirators have been nabbed, but Nijjar has been absconding. The KTF is a spin-off from the Babbar Khalsa International, and KTF aims to revive terror in Punjab. Meanwhile, the Canadian police has levelled another sensational charge linking the Bishnoi group to the Government of India, again without any evidence. Listen in.
What we've seen is there's specific targeting of pro-Khalistan elements in Canada, or members of the pro-Khalistan movement. What we've seen is from an RCMP perspective, is the use of organized crime elements. And I will say and it's been publicly attributed and claimed by one organized crime group in particular, which is the Bishnoi group. So that's what we're seeing here in Canada. And we believe that that group is connected to agents of the Government of India.
Now, India has once again rebutted Canadian assertions, with sources in the Indian government saying that no specifics were given and the burden of denial has been put on India. Responding to Trudeau's claim, sources said that it was the same old Trudeau saying the same old things for the same old quote-unquote reasons. But let's tell you why Trudeau is desperately trying to smear India. Trudeau government is on shaky ground. His Liberal Party is in a minority in the Canadian House of Commons with 153 MPs, whereas the halfway mark is 170. The reason Trudeau was able to head the government was because the new Democratic Party, led by pro-Khalistani Jagmeet Singh, had lent the support of his 25 MPs to Trudeau, pushing it over the majority mark. However, Jagmeet Singh has recently pulled out of the ruling coalition, thereby putting Trudeau on tenterhooks. However, Trudeau has survived a no-confidence motion recently because of 2 fence-sitter blocks that refused to back the motion. Now, in the middle of escalating diplomatic row, the opposition in India says it expects Prime Minister Modi to take the leader of opposition in both houses of parliament and leaders of other parties into confidence on the issue.
ये हमारी फॉरेन पॉलिसी की विफलता है। हम कनाडा जैसे देश को भी विश्वास में नहीं ले पाए। देखिए, ये जो दोनों के रिलेशन का सवाल है, ये काफ़ी अरसे से तनावपूर्ण है।
It is a matter of concern because India and Canada used to have a cordial relationship, and a number of Indians living in Toronto and other parts of Canada, and government of India should keep this in mind.
मेरे लिए सिर्फ एक हम जैसे लोगों के लिए चिंता का विषय है, एक व्यक्ति विशेष का नाम आना एक इस स्केल पर। मैं समझता हूं ये सारी चीजें डिस्पेल होनी चाहिए एविडेंस के साथ। That's what we want.
All right, in Times Now's access more inside details of the India-Canada diplomatic note. The note, which was reportedly shared by the Canadian government, has failed to give any evidence to investigate diplomats. In fact, the Canadian government's person of interest request has no proof to back itself. This was a note sent from Canadian Global Affairs to Indian High Commission on Monday, and it spoke about credible allegations, quote unquote. Rishabh is joining us for more on the story. Rishabh, very interesting to note that while these charges of credible allegations, which in itself, of course, is an oxymoron, many would say, the fact that there is no proof to back up these claims is what is entirely surprising. Why would Justin Trudeau do this and risk the diplomatic ties with another country if he has no evidence to back up these claims, if they are still allegations?
Well, Madhav, if we talk about the diplomatic note that has been shared by the Global Affairs of Canada, which is the Foreign Ministry of Canada, with the Indian High Commission in Ottawa, there was an iota of evidence provided in that note as well. We have been talking about for last 24 hours that though Canada say that they have given evidence to India, they haven't spoken about any proof or any evidence in public or the type of evidence that have been given to India. Even in that diplomatic note, that details were missing. There was not any detail about the evidence that the Canada has against diplomat for Canada to have person of interest tag for Indian diplomats, and that's what rigged Indian government first thing. Apart from that, if we talk about government of India, since government of India sources very categorically say that everything's said and done. For last 1 year, the Canadian government has been engaging with our High Commissioner Sanjay Verma, and now Canadian government is after him, targeting him, and that is something that shows that Canadian government does not have intention to actually investigate. They are just trying to
Well, this is the big question
Indian
indeed. Is it all about politics at the end of the day? Rishabh, is a big question. Thanks so much for joining us with that quick update. And let's open this up, take it across to our guests. With us is Ashok Sajjanhar, former ambassador. With us also is Michael Ruben, former official at the Pentagon and senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Noah Wisbord is international law professor at the McGill University. We also have with us on the show Michael Bociurkiw, who's a Canadian global affairs analyst. Let me start first and foremost with Noah Wisbord. Mr. Noah Wisbord, the question that many are asking is this, that, we are still talking about allegations, credible allegations. There is no proof to back up these claims, even from the Canadian government side. Even the words being used by Mr. Trudeau are so tentative. Why would any country's leader risk diplomatic ties with a country that has been a friendly nation for decades on the basis of mere allegations?
I believe that there is evidence. It would be interesting to see the diplomatic note that was sent from Canada to India describing these allegations. Everybody's referring to this note. I imagine that the Canadian government should have included evidence in that note that would make their case, even if it's not a court of law. So I would be interested to see what the note has to say.
Right. Is that, Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar, the fact, because the stated position of the Indian government is that there's absolutely no evidence on record? Because some of the claims being made are pretty outlandish, because we have a person, Lawrence Bishnoi and his gang, who's committed murders here. They're wanted individuals in Canada. The Canadian government hasn't acted and is saying that these individuals are acting in concert with the Indian government, which appears to be, on the face of it, a very bizarre claim. Mr. Sajjanhar.
No, absolutely, Madhav. Thank you very much for having me. You're right. It does appear to be a bizarre claim because the Indian government and the Bishnoi gang, they are opposed to each other. The Indian government is looking out for the Bishnoi gang because they have committed crimes, they have committed murders in India also. They have been linked to many murders that have taken place here. So obviously, there is an unlawful entity, that cannot be cooperating with the Indian government. Also, Madhav, please have a look at what the RCMP, press conference that took place last evening, what they have said. They say, we believe that there is a connection between the Bishnoi gang and the Indian government. Nothing at all. At some stage or the other, if they are saying that we have shared evidence with India, which India completely rubbishes this charge, then let them come out at least in the open with some bit of evidence. They have not been able to do that at all, and that keeps on putting big question marks against the statements that they are making. And, if they expect that just because Canada is saying something, that India and the world should believe what it is, I don't think that's going to happen. I think those days are gone by. They have to come clean with this, and this is just not going to fly. The way that they have been talking about it. It is now more than 16 months that the killing took place. They have arrested 4 or 5 people also, I understand, in Canada. Has anything come out of that? We have not heard anything whatsoever as to, what they have been able to collect from there. So I think just shooting in the dark will not get you anywhere. That is what the Canadian government seems to be doing. When Trudeau made this comment that there are credible allegations, he shot himself in the foot. I think by these latest charges, without any evidence, they are really shooting themselves in the head.
Right. Let me bring in Michael Bociurkiw. I hope I've got your pronunciation of your name right. Apologies if I haven't. But Mr. Michael, the question is this, that there are 9 Khalistani groups that are reportedly have bases in Canada. There have been multiple deportation requests from the Indian government side. And, far from acting on those who've actually been responsible for heinous crimes here in India, here you have a situation where the Canadian government is actually accusing, the government of India for using gangsters or promoting gangsters and, acting extra territorially, which really doesn't add up. And that's why it's being seen as, Canadian government kind of poking it in India's eye.
Well, I tend to agree with the words in the past 48 hours of Ujjal Hassan. She's the former Premier of British Columbia, my home province. And he said that, yes, the Canadian government has been soft on those engaging in hate speech inside and outside of temples, and that, they should have cracked down on that quite some time ago. However, he also did say, and I agree with him, is that these allegations are very, very serious. After all, they involve extortion, homicides, plural, and violent acts. And I also have to add that the Canadians have said this past weekend, they've met with Mr. Modi's top national security advisor and briefed him in Singapore of the allegations, and they were met with flat denial. But also the Canadians are saying that the Indian government is not cooperating. So it leaves everyone in a kind of tough spot. There are a lot of holes in all the accusations going back and forth. But I will say this, any state that has been caught red-handed, Canadian officials say India is guilty of all of this. They never admit to doing so. So that's where we're left right now.
All right. But, let me bring in Michael Ruben. Michael Ruben, is it really that simple? When it comes to international diplomacy, the least that one would expect is if you're linking a government to an organized crime group, at least you should have some evidence to back up that claim. And that evidence doesn't seem to be anywhere. At least the government of India says, look here, we haven't been given anything of the sort.
Well, let me put it this way. There's evidence, and the evidence could be there, but there's interpretation of the evidence. And the interpretation of the evidence could be very, very wrong. I juxtaposed this Nijar case with the Panoon case, which is ongoing in the United States, in which evidence existed. The Indian government actually put someone in prison. There's an Indian delegation in Washington here today. Where I see the Canadian case is different is this, that you've got a situation in which Justin Trudeau said, American intelligence, they provided it to us, it backs up our interpretation. But you know what? When the Americans have a smoking gun, whether it's with regard to an assassination on an ally's soil or on an enemy's soil, even Pakistan and Iran. We forewarn those countries. In this case, there was no smoking gun that I'm aware of. And so I suspect what happened is that Najjar was killed. The United States said to the Canadians, let's give you whatever chatter we have. Justin Trudeau decided to interpret that evidence in a very tenuous way and then hide behind the shield of secrecy of intelligence, and so not have to have accountability to explain how he came to his conclusions. And unfortunately, when you're in a hole, the first rule of holes is when you're dug yourself into a hole, stop digging. Unfortunately, Trudeau doesn't understand that.
All right, let me bring in Professor John Packer, who's a professor of international law and conflict resolution, also who's with us from the University of Ottawa. Professor Packer, the question is this, that is there a larger reason that Mr. Trudeau is doing this? Because there is a perception here that this is just being done with a view to placating a certain vote bank, certain political parties like the MDP, etc., which of course have, parted ways with Mr. Trudeau. But it's nothing but an attempt at Mr. Trudeau ensuring his popularity, and it is an election year at the end of the day. So is that what's really driving Mr. Trudeau and his actions?
No, I think that's a tremendous overstatement, and it's a total misreading of the Canadian political situation at the moment. There's definitely competition politically and very likely an impending election for which Trudeau is not exactly in a friendly relationship anymore with the New Democratic Party led by Narender Singh. So that's more of the speculation. If I may say so, I've been hearing a lot of speculation here. We don't really know the hard facts here. They haven't been disclosed fully, and that's understandable in criminal investigations, particularly of sensitive kinds. And that has to come forward at a certain point. So in terms of international relations and international law, there's some pretty clear things here. First of all, we are talking about conduct in the sovereign territory and regarding persons, including citizens of Canada, which is frankly not the affair of India. Whatever India thinks of certain attitudes and so forth, the same would work in the inverse. Canada's sovereignty ends at the territory and the citizens of India within India. Now, obviously, India has characterized, and it may be well-founded, that some of the persons of concern to them are fomenting not only separatism, but the use of violence, which is qualified by India as terrorism. But that, there is no international definition of terrorism, and Canada does not necessarily hold that or has not reached that determination under Canadian law. Under Canadian law, these persons are allowed to hold views, including separatist views, including the right to resist. So this is a clash in international law, and normally it should be managed through discreet and careful diplomatic relations. The problem here is those diplomatic relations have not been conducted very well or discreetly, and we now have a conundrum because Trudeau is going to have, as he had to already, defend this publicly before Parliament and before independent criminal investigations, which are declaring that there are some 30 persons who have now been charged, and that's not tenable. That's not tenable simply in Canada.
No, but the question over here, in fact, Professor John Packer, is that what do you do when these are persons accused of acts of terror? There are some very heinous crimes. There are Indian agencies that have filed charge sheets in courts of law. There are due processes that have been followed.
They're accused in India. They're accused in India.
Yes.
So they're not in Canada, and they may have legitimate defenses against those accusations. So there are issues. I think one of the previous speakers mentioned about potentially language, for example, hate crimes and so forth, which Canadian law does address. And that's an interesting question that needs to be pursued. But one cannot go immediately to say because India says
may I just point out, and in fact, I would like to bring
terrorism.
I'd just like to bring in Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar. It's not just acts here in India, sir, incidentally. There are acts where in that tableau, they've actually projected and presented the killing of former Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. And that is, for all Indians. It's not for any one particular political party or ideology here. That's an insult to all Indians, Mr. Sajjanhar.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's an insult to Indians. But
just a second, Mr. Packer, I'm going to get Mr. Sajjanhar. You can respond to him.
Yeah. What is much graver is that there are threats that have been made by the same groups against Indian diplomats that, they are going to cause them bodily harm. that they are going to sort of, there have been threats made against the Indian Prime Minister. There are threats that have been made that we are, that Indians should not be traveling by their national airline, by Air India, because they know what happened. Now, surely these are crimes that need to be taken cognizance of. These are not crimes that have been committed in India. So I think, hiding behind, some sort of speculation that these might be in, whatever might have happened in India, it has not happened in Canada. Are you waiting for another aircraft disaster before you take any action? Because the point is that even when that aircraft disaster took place, Canada has not been able to redeem itself. How many people were you able to charge? How many people were you able to hold accountable? Not one of them. So how do you expect that the credibility of the Canadian legal system, law enforcement system will be respected around the world?
Right.
You've been sitting, the RCMP has been sitting for last 16 months on this assassination bid. They were able to make some arrest only after about 10, 12 months or so. And investigations, interrogations have been going on. What has happened? Meaning,
let me bring in Noah Wisbert on that. Noah Wisbert, please respond to what Ashok Sajjanhar just said. He's given you a number of instances, and particularly the Kanishka bombing that happened in the 80s. Right from then until now, there's been a stubborn refusal from Canada's side to actually act on such elements. At the end of the day, if there's an international incident such as an aircraft being bombed, it doesn't matter about the jurisdiction at the end of the day. What matters is that people who are responsible for taking innocent human lives are acted upon. Noah Wisbert.
It's not accurate what the last speaker just said. Canada prosecuted and found guilty several people in charge who were masterminds of the Air India bombing. You can read those cases. One of them went all the way to the Supreme Court on it for evidentiary matters.
But the prime accused was let off, sir. Isn't that a fact?
Not at the fact. There's several people were found guilty of the Air India bombing.
Ashok Sajjanhar.
Person who was made to go through a sentence. None whatsoever, because all of them were released because of lack of evidence. Now, that doesn't speak very highly of either the law enforcement or the justice system.
And in the present case as well, there have been no action that has been taken. When there are death threats that are being given, can the government just sit and allow that to happen? If you really want to ensure friendly relations to the country, the minimum that must be there is a deterrent sent out to persons who are threatening with their lives the diplomats of a certain country. I think that's the very least that would be expected, but we'll have to leave it there. Ashok Sajjanhar, Michael Ruben, Noah Wisbert, Professor John Packer, and Michael Bociurkiw, thank you so much for joining us this evening.